Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have another special guest on. And I think this guest is special because it is an industry that you really don't hear talked about as a business as much. So I'm excited to have Amina Abubakar on, and welcome to the show, Amina.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Now, so we're going to talk about, the pharmacy industry, and many people, they hear about the pharmacy because, they may use the services, but very few people ever actually hear about, what is it like running a business in this segment. So I'm interested to talk about that. But before we do, tell us a little bit about, your background and, what was your life before getting into the business of pharmacy?
Sure. So I was born and raised in East Africa, Kenya. And then I had this crazy idea to conquer my biggest, wildest dreams and come to America for college. So I ended up in pharmacy school because I had the curiosity of why medicine works, how it works, and so I've always had just that curiosity about medicine, not necessarily being a doctor, but how to make medicines better, safer, and behind the scenes. So that's how I ended up in pharmacy school. And then during pharmacy school, I started wanting to know more about how patients get better, but what barriers do patients have, because looking at the resources for where I come from and the resources that were available in America, there was such a huge gap. And so I wanted to create solutions for health equity. Like how do we empower everyone? How do we have access to healthcare? And so that's just kind of have been my journey, is problem solving to find access to healthcare for everyone who needs it.
Okay, awesome. Now, before we go a little bit further, I do have to ask, what part of Kenya are you from?
I'm from Mombasa. It's a small
Mombasa.
island in East Africa, yeah, in Kenya.
Okay. The reason why I asked is because my wife was born in Nairobi. So
Really?
her mom is Kenyan, her dad's Nigerian. So when you said that, I was like, oh, I have to ask.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Well, great.
Okay. Awesome, awesome. So now, I guess I'm always curious about that because even like I said, when my wife and I first started dating and I started meeting, more people that came from Africa to come to get an education here was, going into medicine something that was encouraged from like a family background, or was that kind of you decided that, hey, this is what I want to pursue?
For me, I had two uncles that were traditional herbalists, and people visited them and they gave different plants and herbs. And so I always wondered, did these people really get better? And then I always thought to myself, why, when we get sick, we get Tylenol, Like, how does it work? Why, when my little toe hurts and you give me medicine, how does it get to that little toe and then it's better? So for me, it was more like there has to be something with this medicine. So none of my family is from a pharmaceutical background or even medical background. And so I used to tease my uncles and said, hey, I'll go and learn the Western side. And so if we all work together, we can take care of everyone. And that was just, yeah, so it was by luck.
Awesome. So now, as you kind of matriculated, as you said, through learning the Western side of medicine, what attracted you to wanting to start a business in pharmacy versus just working as a pharmacist?
Great. So I don't come from a background of entrepreneurs. My family is not in business, and I never saw myself as even that was ever a possibility. So when I graduated from pharmacy school, I was really looking to get involved in communities and serve as a community pharmacist. And I had a passion serving patients with HIV/AIDS because where I came from, that was what was killing most people. And I wanted to find basically the cure, right? And so I gravitated towards that disease state because I believed no one should die, and we could find the best medicines and give it to people. So I was just in search of really community That's what I wanted. And so my first job was at a community pharmacy, but it was CVS Pharmacy. So it was more of the bigger chain. And that's all I knew, right? If you were not in the hospital pharmacy, then community pharmacy was that. So I had no idea as an individual you could even own a pharmacy. So it just so happened I met a lady who had her own pharmacy and she needed help. And so I would staff for her a few days a week, and I fell in love with the structure. She knew everyone. She made decisions very easily. When people couldn't afford medications, she was able to discount them at the level of just herself. But when I worked at the big stores, it didn't matter if a person came with a child and they had no money and I knew they needed this medication. It wasn't our policy to discount those medications. So I struggled. I struggled with being able to be nimble, to be able to say, hey, it's okay. You can take this at cost, or we can help you afford it, or pay later. So that's what I found the most when I was at CVS, is that people are people and life happens, and then they lost their job and suddenly I can't help them. So when I found this other avenue, I was intrigued, and it was very, very satisfying because I knew the families who came in, and we talked beyond medicine, and so I started asking them, what are they doing outside of the medications to get better? Do they understand why they take them? And I realized people didn't. And they're like, just because my doctor gave me, and I was like, oh, wow. So you don't know why you're on 10 pills. I
Wow.
know. And they would pick the wrong pills to say, one patient showed me the allergy pill, but she thought that was the blood pressure pill. So I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
okay, there's a lot of work to do. And with that said, I was encouraged to take a risk because I felt it was such needed. And I said, what's the worst that could happen, right? It doesn't work. And at least I would know it doesn't work now. But yeah,
Mhm.
so that's, it was really to solve problems. It wasn't even I wanted to be profitable or I thought I wanted to own a pharmacy. I was like, there are things and no one else is doing them. And I want to
Mhm.
do it.
Mhm. And I find that to be very, very similar to the story as I talked to so many different entrepreneurs where I think one entrepreneur that I had on said it best, where he was like, being an entrepreneur is a very tough journey. So he was like, if you're not motivated by solving the problem, if you're only motivated by the money, you probably won't actually last in it. But it's like when you're motivated by solving a problem that you see, and it's just like it just bugs you. You can't sleep at night because you know that, hey, that problem needs to be solved. And that's something that I hear a lot of entrepreneurs say and they share.
Yes, very true.
So, and I think one of the thing that you mentioned, I thought that was really good. It was where you talked about, just how some people were just taking the medicine and they didn't really have understanding about like, hey, why this, why am I taking this medicine? What is it supposed to do? And knowing that. So how did you find, the process of helping people start to understand, hey, this is why you're taking this medicine, or this is what it's supposed to do? Like, do people gravitate to that well?
Yes. So at first, we had to break the culture of most people when they were going to these big pharmacies. You pick up the prescription, it's in an open area, right? And they ask you, do you have a question for the pharmacist? Your first response is going to be no, because I'm out here in the public, right? I'm not telling you my problem. I don't want people to know. So the first thing is when I opened my pharmacy, I built a consultation room. So people had the privacy to talk to me, because those were everyone who was ever asked. I mean, if you've picked a prescription, I'm sure you was like, no, I don't. And then you just go on Google in your home privacy and just Dr. Google, right? And so, and so that was, so first was like physical, saying, how do I transform this for people to know this is important and they have privacy and I'm willing to sit down with them. And then the next thing that I changed was I didn't let you ask me. Okay. I just said, hey, by the way, could you step out for a second? You probably know this already, but you're taking this. Be careful with sunlight. make sure you take this with meal. This is the reason why. And so that opened up the, oh, I didn't know. I'm glad you told me because, or don't take this with food, because it's going to decrease absorption. So people didn't really ask. So then I just kind of started the conversation, didn't give you a choice. Then people fell in love with that and they told other people, oh, wow, I went there and they actually talked to me. And that's just how education. Then I started reaching out to communities and I would do community speaking events. So I would work with case managers. I would work with social workers who would hold group classes or, for example, for the HIV patient, they always had HIV group for empowerment and, the social aspect of dealing with stigma, emotion. And I said, hey, could I come in and be the medication expert and just ask people, what do they know? Do they know how this affects their liver? Do they know why they tell them not to drink and at the same time taking the medicine? And that's just how it became. And so word of mouth, I would be invited to different communities to speak and educate. And so then those patients gravitated towards our pharmacy because some of them said, hey, I've been diagnosed 15 years. I really didn't even understand how HIV happens in my body, And so, and I would just use very simple examples because patients leave their doctor. And for example, again, I gravitate towards HIV just because I work with the population a lot and you're told of these labs, right? Make sure your CD4 count is high, right? We want your viral load down. And a patient leaves, they agree. But when I talk to them and I say, hey, CD4 is your police force. It's like your security. It's like your defense. Would you want it to be more or less? They would say, oh, of course, I want more defense. I want more protection. And then I say, the viral is like the criminal. Do you want more of that? Do you want it to invade every cell? And they would say, no. I said, so what medications would do this? If you take this, it stops the replication of the criminals. So things like that. And then they were more compliant and people felt like they understood.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow. I think that definitely changes a lot for people. So, speaking of that, where can people find, your pharmacy and where can they find you online or on social media to follow, the story of your business and just to do business with you?
Sure. Our website has information about us and what activities we do. And that's www.rxclinicpharmacy.com. And then we have a Facebook page, RX Clinic Pharmacy, Facebook, and we have Instagram as well.
Option. Now, before we wrap up, one question I like to ask every guest, and I'm very interested in your opinion on this because as we were talking before, you've been in business for 11 years, and so when you think about kind of your journey and the different challenges and the lessons you kind of learned along the way, what are just two pieces of wisdom that you've learned in your entrepreneurial journey that you think other entrepreneurs should definitely take heed to and learn from as well?
Sure. I think my first awakening is when I read the book, The E-Myth, the myth of being an entrepreneur. And we feel like just because I'm a good pharmacist, I will make a good business owner as a pharmacy, right? Just because I'm a good baker, I would make a good business of a bakery. And I think that was the wake-up call because for me going in, it was all about me and what I wanted to do for my patients. And that burns you out. It's not scalable. It's not you can't duplicate it. So as you grow, the patients or your customers only want to talk to Amina. That can get overwhelming pretty fast, right? And now you become resentful of like, oh my God, I don't even have time because now the part that made you good was the technical part, right? So the first thing I realized is how do you embrace three personalities in one early on, but you have to be aware that you have to wear the three hats. So you have to be one, the visionary, right? What do I want my brand to look like? Where are we going next year and year beyond? Then you also have to be the technical person who's doing the business, especially when you first start, right? You are the host, right? You are the visionary. You're getting the customers, right? So you have to be that technician of your business. And then you also have to manage. You have to manage finances. You have to manage inventory. You have to manage people. So I feel like from the very beginning, knowing that you have to take into consideration, and if you don't have other people, at least divide your time. You have to be intentional. Otherwise, you'll always be on a whirlwind that doesn't stop, because each one of these personalities needs you equally to build a business, right? So that's one thing, is making time, be aware of those, and put in equal amount of time in those subgroups to make sure your business is growing in the right direction. And then avoid a single point of failure. You know, a lot of us is, we hire people and I'll say, so I'll hire you because you're great. So it seems like my business is only dependent on how good you are, not how strong my systems have been built. So it's always to remember, systems run a business and people run systems. Because if someone walks away for whatever reason, natural causes, better job opportunities, you always see small business starting over with a person, you know. But if you build a system, anyone should be able to walk into your business and know your opening procedures, your closing procedures. But we normally get so comfortable with people and we let people run our business, not systems.
Wow.
So invest in building systems, even if you're small and you're just like, oh, I'm just this person who just has a flower shop or a coffee shop. But there's systems, from ordering, from returning out of stock, from, you know, cycle counting your inventory, from customer, you know, recovery. Those are systems, because you do it naturally, you do it good, but for other people, you have to write it down. So don't wait till you're too big to start writing systems. You actually want to write them as you're thinking about them.
Wow, I think those are really good points. And I want to say, Amina, thank you so much for coming onto the show, and also congratulations with the 11 years so far and the many years to come in your successful business and what you're doing to not only provide a quality product, but to provide quality information so people can really understand that process of, you know, getting and living healthier. So thank you so much for coming on to the show. I really enjoyed having you.
Sure, my pleasure. And I hope I could help someone who's stuck making a decision of being an entrepreneur to do it, or someone who feels burnout and lost like I was, you know, get some light to have the confidence to keep moving on. So thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, be sure to click the subscribe button and follow us on all social media platforms as the Business Talk Library.